You need to be able to um, change your thought process during the day, especially for a marketer. You have to think about your brand awareness. You have to think about analyst relationship. You have to think about blogs. You might think about webinars, your demand gen needs, talking to sales, and your revenue goals. So you constantly, you get the picture, right? And then once you
Yeah,
have a customer, you have to figure out how to keep them engaged, how to make sure that they're getting the best value and they continue to be your customer.
there are secrets out there, guys. Performance marketing secrets, and knowing just one or two of them can absolutely light up your funnels. Let's go. This is the Revenue Driven CMO. I'm your host, Chris Mechanic. Join me as I uncover the secrets of the world's most elite CMOs and marketing leaders. The Revenue Driven CMO is sponsored by Web Mechanics, the AI driven performance agency that makes you smarter. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Revenue Driven CMO. I am your man, Chris Mechanic, here with a really exciting guest today who's got over 20 years of experience in both B2B and B2C marketing and product management roles with tech companies. And one of the things that I really love about this guest and enjoy about her is that she comes from a technical background. So her background is all in, programming and enterprise software development, and there's just something about that kind of a background when you then sort of transition from that into a marketing role, there's a real magic that happens. So I'm very excited to have her here on the show. In her previous lives, she was at Symantec. She did a stint at HP, Hewlett Packard. Recently, she was at Five9, which we all know and love. And she is currently the CMO at Jitterbit, which is a really, really interesting company in the enterprise automation space that I'm jazzed to learn a bit more about. But ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Miss Jayashree Rajan. How are you, Jayashree?
I am doing well. Thank you, Chris. Excited to be here.
Yeah, yeah, likewise. Excited to be here. I know that you have some awesome stuff to share in terms of your secret. I want to talk about Jitterbit, and then I want to geek out with you a little bit also toward the end here, just on like tools and different AI apps that we're using. Um, so let's jump right into it. And why don't you share with the audience, like you've had an awesome career so far, and it seems to be just continually getting better. What is one of your big secrets to success?
I'm actually going to cheat here a little bit. I'm going to go with two of them, but I think one of the main secrets, and this is like you said, right, through my career and the different phases I've gone through, from a developer to a product manager to a marketer, I've gone through an evolution. And even, in my role over the last several years within marketing, I have done a lot of different things. So my secret is actually context switching, right? You need to be able to um, change your thought process during the day, especially for a marketer. You have to think about your brand awareness. You have to think about analyst relationship. You have to think about blogs. You might think about webinars, your demand gen needs, talking to sales, and your revenue goals. So you constantly, you get the picture, right? And then once you
Yeah.
have a customer, you have to figure out how to keep them engaged, how to make sure that they're getting the best value and they continue to be your customer. So lots of different things going on, and context switching is one of those things that I feel I have learned and mastered over the years. Without that, I wouldn't be successful. And I would say, because I said two, the second one, and it comes again from my background, I'm a data nerd, right? I know a lot of people shy away from using data or nerd as a descriptor, but I love data. And I think that's one of those things that my background has taught me from engineering, but also it helps me be successful as a marketer because I would love to see measurement, numbers, testing, A/B test. What do we learn from it? It's always about a hypothesis and figuring out what works and what doesn't. So being able to grasp that data and using that is another secret. I would say, uh, you know, that I have learned and mastered over the years.
That's awesome. Yeah, I want to definitely double click into the data side because I see you've published some articles on LinkedIn around just like leveraging and harnessing that data. Definitely a hot topic. On context switching, it's interesting your background because I know like as a developer or a product manager, you probably had less context switching, right? Like you had a more finite uh, view of
Yep.
things. And
Yep.
sure, there was the occasional meeting probably here or there that was annoying, but um, it was nothing like being a CMO. A CMO, I think, is probably the hardest job in the C suite, frankly, because like you're technically inclined, but and CMOs are expected to be technically inclined these days, and they're expected to be, great writers, great creatives, great demand gen people. Like it's just so many different hats. Um, so when you approach context switching, is it in the way of like you're trying to minimize it, like you try to time block and chunk your time, or is it in a way where like you just have some mechanism to just really like seamlessly switch from one thing to another?
Yeah, and that's a great question, right? So context switching has to happen. It's a day by day thing. It's a weekly thing, monthly thing, right? You have to be on top of it, especially as a marketer. But hey, you run a company. I'm sure you're running through the same set of challenges, right? Context switching.
Yeah.
Uh, but my concept or my thought process is, hey, when you're moving from, let's say, you have a blog brainstorming session. And then from there, you have to move to a different meeting where you have to talk about numbers, right? Or another meeting where you have to talk about, hey, what's our campaign and, our plans. So many different topics, right? Three different topics now I already talked about. So in my example, what I was, again, my technique is taking a few minutes, wrap up, like you're in a meeting or you have a topic, do something, take a break, but logically wrap that up and then jump into, before you jump into the next thing, right? Or the next context. Now, you may not always be able to say, hey, I'm actually going to finish this. I'm going to write a blog, right? But
Mhm.
pen in it, bring it to some logical closure, get some thoughts, right? Hey, okay, what are the two or three things that I had to write about? And maybe bullet points. Then move on to the next thing that you have to focus on, your Excel, your numbers, your data, your reporting, right? So you cannot just completely drop something and just jump to the next thing. It's about how do you close it for that moment? How do you take away things that you need to still work on and then move on to the next one? But have a good break, or have a clean break, if you will.
Yeah. So sort of like create some mechanism of closure, whatever that is, even
Right.
if the task is
Yeah,
incomplete. I've
exactly.
done that in the past, and I'm I'm not sure if others are like this too, but I go through periods where I'm really, really organized and, everything is decluttered, right? And
Yeah.
then I'll go through other periods where that's not the case, where I'm just like running around chaotically or just like, going meeting to meeting like a zombie. Um, One thing that I've done in terms of closing tasks is I have this notepad, or like we use Asana sometimes. So like maybe I'll document it in Asana or set like a follow
Yeah.
up task. Um, are there other like what are some other closure mechanisms when you're just like midstream on a task and you want to pick it up later?
I have, those cycles that you're talking about. I think a lot of people grapple with that, right? Sometimes you're on a roll, you're able to tackle everything. Other times you're like, oh my gosh, I have several different things. So what I do actually, just like you, and I've tried several electronic kind of application software, if you will. But somehow I find that it's yet another note that's stuck somewhere in my laptop, and I have to now search through, to figure out where I put that. So what I do actually is, like you, I do believe in like sticky. I always have notepads. The really important things, right? Like the two. So I made some notes this morning from one of my meetings, right? And hey, I have to work on these. These are the open topics. So I keep those, the most important things. for things that, and I'll tell you why I do it this way. Things that I have maybe slightly lower priority, have a little bit more time. Maybe this is something I'm going to pick up tomorrow, or maybe I have to work on this over the weekend because I need a block of time. Those I'll send the reminders to myself. Sometimes I do Slack reminders or text reminders. Those are the two ways I text myself, I Slack myself, because I know that's the one area that's not going to get cluttered. Slack is cluttered, right? Everybody keeps slacking you. But my notes to myself, I have a good history and I can go back and I can actually start checking things off, right? I like to strike off things. I love it. It gives me a sense of accomplishment when I'm actually able to strike something off, or I'm
Yeah.
able to actually rationalize and say, hey, you know what? I thought about it. And maybe this is not the time to get through this. Let me push this off, right? But at least I've rationalized my thought process and brought that to resolution. One of the other things, and this I would love to hear your thoughts, between meetings, because we do a lot of different things. There are lots of different meetings and topics, and each time you're thinking, you're processing, you're working through, right? In those meetings, you're discussing, you have ideas. I love to actually take a couple minutes break between meetings, but when the first meeting wraps up and the next meeting starts. So my ideal is get a cup of hot water, the microwave, right? So I go put, that's the reason why I think I started doing hot water. I have my hot water today at my desk again. Well, I think it helps me the 2 minutes, 3 minutes when I'm waiting. It helps me get the previous meeting, the thoughts to a logical place. Hey, here are the takeaways. And then think about what should I do for my next meeting? And I would love to hear your thoughts and what you do for those kind of content that you have to switch during the day.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I'm the foremost expert on it. Like I was saying, sometimes I'm just running from meeting to meeting. Uh, and the nature of my role is sometimes like impromptu meetings come up, like right after we get off of this, I'm likely to check Slack, check my email, and then there's likely going to be something vying for my attention there. So it's a very inexact science. But here's one thing that I do. I always will schedule a buffer, like 10 to 15 minutes between meetings. So at least I have some time. A lot of times I'll go during that time for just like a bio break, get a water or go to the restroom. But one of my favorite techniques is just simply thinking about the meeting that you have coming up and doing so in a way where you're visualizing the outcomes that you want. Like you're imagining the meeting going the way that you want it to go, more so than preparing what you're going to say exactly.
Right.
You're more so like envisioning the other people saying the things that you would like them to hear. I don't have any scientific evidence at all, but it makes me feel better going into the meeting. Like it gives me, it puts me in a good mood. Uh, and since I've been doing that a couple years ago, usually the outcomes are acceptable. I don't know. I wish I would have measured it maybe in some other way. I haven't, but no, I find that it often makes for successful meetings doing that.
Yeah. No, that's a good tip. Thank you. I have a meeting next week. I think I'm going to try this and I'll let you know
Yeah.
how that, because that is one of those meetings where you know, I have to prepare, but then I'm also thinking, hey, this might be a tip that I'll definitely try out. I'll
Yeah.
visualize the outcome and then I'll let you know how that goes.
And it helps me, particularly for meetings that I don't really care to have, you know? For happy meetings and fun meetings, like I might not do that. But when I find myself sort of dreading what's coming up next, or that, like, that's my trigger to then start
Yeah.
visualizing how I want it to go.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good tip.
Yeah.
Pocket knock.
Hey, exclusive for listeners of this podcast, Web Mechanics will do 10 to 20 hours of work for you for free. Literally no sales calls, no BS. Just give them a problem and they will put a team to work for you for free for 10 to 20 hours, even if you're already a client. If you're struggling with demand gen, lead gen, SEO, SEM, Google ads, LinkedIn ads, conversion optimization. If you can't get Facebook or Meta ads to work for the life of you, or you can't figure out attribution, Web Mechanics will take a good hard look at whatever problem you give them, whatever programs you put in front of them, and they will give you an objective, informed opinion, plus some advice from 10 to 20 hours of senior level attention. So I would suggest take them up on this offer. It's ridiculous. Go to revenuedrivencmo.com/free, fill out the 2-minute form, and you will not regret it. Literally zero downside, unlimited potential for growth. So do yourself a favor, revenuedrivencmo.com/free, no hyphens, no punctuations. You will be happy about that decision. So I have a question for you, in terms of team and managing people. So you know the importance of flow state and concentration and like the tax associated with that context switching.
Yeah.
Do you do anything with your team or for your team to kind of solve for that?
Yeah. And again, this is not ideal, right? Because, hey, small teams, we have a lot of things going on and we have to do, you know, all of those. We have to deliver on a lot of things at the same time. So, a few things that I do, and again, I'm learning, right? Like you, I learn from my team. Someone might come up with a tip and be like, hey, let's try that out, right? But I think some things that I definitely, any company, any team, that I'm working with, I tell them, make a list, right? On your priorities. And it's not just a list, right? It's also your way of prioritizing. When you're doing that list, think about, if I do this, does it have a business implication? Does it not have a business implication? Right? That is one of those things that I definitely ask my team to think about, because you might think, hey, this person asked for this person asked for this. Hey, you, Jayashree, you said this. That is the most important thing now, but it may not be the most important thing, right? So make a list. And sometimes the team might not be able to prioritize, right? So the other thing that I tell them is speak up, right? Ask questions. Say, hey, I don't understand the priority of this or the business, justification for this. Ask questions, right? We always learn more when we ask questions. So that is the thing that I ask any of my teams. I try to get them early in the cycle to say, prioritize. There's only so much you can do, and ask questions if you're not clear. And I always call it agile marketing, right? And this one came probably from my engineering background, and my technology background. Think of your day to day as a backlog and say, this sprint, I can do 10 things. The 11th thing comes up, you may not be able to do that, right? So you will have to pull something out of your sprint to put that thing, the new requirement inside your sprint. So I try to explain and give them this analogy that, hey, it's a backlog. There's only finite things in that backlog. If you have to get one additional thing and that's priority, let's get one thing off. But for that, make a list, prioritize, ask questions.
Yeah. No, that's a really good one. Um, I'm curious, and I'm always curious about this with CMOs, but what like systems or tech are you using mostly for communication? Like, is it Slack or Teams or email or
Yeah.
like how do you communicate, especially with your team?
It's a lot of different, and sometimes I'm not going to lie to you, it does get a little overwhelming because we have to, and I'm also equally guilty, right? It is emails, it is also Slack. Sometimes it's just that impromptu call on Zoom. I think you just mentioned this, right? A few minutes ago. It's that, hey, I had this question and I couldn't wait. I have to ask you this. I see the person's green on Slack. Call them, right?
Yeah.
So that impromptu Zoom meeting. And then it is also text, right? Easy, quick. Hey, I'm going to text you this question and maybe I'll get a response back. So I would say all of those channels. And we are a digital company, we are a remote company. So everybody works from different regions, different time zones. So we do have to make sure that we do use a lot of digital channels. The problem becomes, how do you know, track the documents? How do you make sure that you're sending them in one place? We're able to find them. Luckily, we use Google suite of products, so we are able to. I can always go back and search. Someone shared, a Google document with me. I can go back and I can search. I can pull that up no matter where it came from, Slack or email. But it's a noisy world we live in.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know how you do it. I would love to hear any tips that you have learned over the years.
I hate Slack and email. I suck at both. I'm perpetually behind. But what I don't do any notifications, none, like especially to my phone. But then I have like the critical few people that if they send something, like I definitely need to listen to it.
Yeah,
And I have those set to be like invasive notifications,
got
more or
it.
less. And then I just
Nice.
ignore everything else. No, I'm just kidding. Um, there was one other thing I was gonna say. Uh, oh man, it was a good thing too. It's slipping my mind now. But yeah, in general, I find Slack to be it's almost like a joke, like they named it, like they called it Slack because they knew that it's just gonna like distract you and cause you to slack off and like not do the important things.
Yeah,
So I very much have a love-hate relationship with it. But yeah,
yeah,
we use Google Drive too. So that does or Google Suite.
sweet.
So that
Yeah.
does make it easy. And we like SEO the names of our documents. So
Oh,
it'll be like budget, Q4 budget. And then I'm like P&L, profit and loss, revenue. Like I just like put all the keywords in.
yeah.
So later when I'm searching for it, I'll find it somehow. Cool.
Oh, your document.
Well,
Another tip that I took.
yeah, yeah, SEO your document. So hey, so closing out on context switching, um, it sounds like your advice is not so much to avoid it, but to get good at it and to find your routine, like find your rhythm, that thing that you can do to basically regroup, recalibrate between meetings, and go
Topics.
into the next meeting fresh.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And there are other tips that I have learned from folks. And this is where you bring the team together, you ask for what works. I haven't tried those yet, but some of them said, hey, I just go and stand out on the patio for a few minutes, pet my dog. That gives you the context switching, right? So that, or I go and walk my dogs, or I go make myself a cup of coffee. So I think there are lots, but I would say find that sweet spot that works for you and, you know, try that or try someone else's advice and see if that works for you.
Yeah. And I discovered not very long ago that there were certain team members that were just overwhelmed with meetings. I didn't even know it. But one day they just cracked and they were like, I can't do any more meetings. Um, and then so ever since then we made a rule that hey, if you're in a meeting and you feel like you're not needed or you're not adding value or it's not relevant, just leave.
Yeah.
Like you are allowed to just leave.
Yeah. And one similar rule that I ask my team, and I've empowered them to do this, if you're invited to a meeting and they haven't told you why you need to be there, and oftentimes, I don't know if you've seen this, but nowadays, even meetings, you have sometimes 10, 12, 15 people, and then it gets forwarded to more people. And everybody thinks they have to attend. And for me, my advice to my team is hey, if you don't know the purpose, if they haven't told you what we're going to accomplish, what do you have to bring to the meeting, or what you're going to take away from the meeting, either ask them for the agenda or say, hey, I have something else. I'm going to decline this meeting till you tell me that there is a role and I'll join, happily join. I'll bring my ideas or contribution. So that's the other thing, because I heard the same just like you. The team feels like they have to constantly jump from meeting to meeting just because
Yeah.
of an invite, and it does burn them out.
Yeah. Definitely. And I mean, I can imagine it being incredibly frustrating, especially when you have other things to do and, other things you're being held accountable to or other things that people are counting on you for. Like, yeah,
Yep.
that's enough to drive anybody kind of crazy. Cool. Well, let's pivot real quick. That was very useful and very insightful. I'm sure many of the people listening here got some inspiration and some cool things to try. You mentioned also one of your other superpowers being data. Uh, and, most, it's funny because As recently as 2006. 2006 was when I was getting into the game, a couple years before that actually, but 2006 is when Google Analytics hit the scene. And it totally changed everything because before that, it was just like basically the log files. So you could see some very basic stuff, but you couldn't create segments or, track conversions or anything like this. Um, so that really changed the game. And I think that was the beginning of this big data revolution. Like pre 2006, there was no marketers saying, hey, we're data driven. When we started the agency in 2009, we were like one of the first to the scene. Like it was like the idea of like, hey, we're going to track how many visits we get, how many conversions we get. We're going to see how many of those conversions become customers. We're going to calculate, the returns. Like that was new. Like people were like, that's awesome. But now it's very much table stakes. But still, I think some people are very data inclined and others talk about it, but are, probably still a little bit uncomfortable about it. But for someone like you who's like really technical, I'm curious to peek into your world. Like, what does your data stack look like? Like, how is it set up, or when you enter a new company, like what are the first things you do to really just get your data house in order?
Great question. Because when I got in here, Jitterbit, the first quarter, my goal was to actually get a good view into the data and main things, right? Hey, what's our baseline? What's the traffic to our website? What are the kind of visitors that are coming to our website? Do we know anything about them? What are the top pages they go to? How much time they spend on the website? Where do they go? Gravitate? Which calls to action do they gravitate towards? So, the website itself, several different things, right? And then what are the places they're coming to the website from? Is it from certain blogs? Is it from your ads? Is it from webinars? So I had to also parse all of those things. So it's not just data, engagement, and traffic on your website. It's also what is driving that traffic? Where are your conversions coming from? Sometimes it might just be offline events where we collect data. Other
Yeah.
time, thankfully, we live in a largely digital world. Most of the flow, the data capture, all of that happens in digital world. So just being able to get that baseline, just being able to see what have we been doing in the past that worked, what have we done in the past that didn't work. That was really important for me because without that, you don't know what you should amplify and what you should not be doing more of, right?
Yeah.
And otherwise, you're just throwing good money after bad, right? You don't want to be a marketer that says, hey, I'll do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and then pray that something
Yeah.
works and something sticks, right? Even things like your brand awareness, right? What are your impressions? How many people are talking about your campaigns or your posts, right? What's the engagement? How many reposts, shares? There is data for everything. Now, the interesting part though, and that's why I love this, but it's also painful for a marketer. I was reading this somewhere a couple of days ago. I think it was State of Martech or something. The average marketer has to deal with pulling data from about 12 to 14 systems on an average. And I'm sure
Yeah.
you relate to that, right?
Oh yeah.
Every engagement, every piece of information that I talk to you about, they all live in different places, different pieces. So being able to bring them together, build the dashboard or that consolidated view that you can say, here is how my awareness looks. So I have literally a PowerPoint and I came in, that's what I shared with my team. I said, here are the things we need to track that shows how our brand awareness is. Here are the things that we need to track that show how people are thinking about the conversion aspect and our brand is in the mix. This is how we have to measure post conversion, right? Or post consideration and post conversion and what should we be thinking about for those. So it's really a lot of metrics you have to look at, but also a lot of systems that you have to, harness and get that data from.
Yeah. We use Funnel IO, which is to aggregate that data, and then Looker Data Studio also sometimes in addition to it to sort of visualize
Right.
um, and mash up. And that's actually really helpful, like super duper helpful. I think for anybody that is still just manually going into other systems, I think that's really step one is like, hey,
Yeah.
just aggregate those views and that data. But that's really smart. That's like the first thing that you do because otherwise you're just hamstrung. It's like you have this crutch the whole time where you just have to keep logging into different systems all the time.
Exactly. We don't have a visualization tool here, but we do use Salesforce. So much of the dashboard in terms of your NQRs. But again, the reality is web traffic and all of that doesn't live in Salesforce, right? So there is a little bit of that that we still have to, get from other systems. But I took funnel.io because I haven't actually used that in the past in any of my roles. So I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, no, it's very helpful. I mean, it just brings everything together and there's hundreds, if not thousands of connectors. So I'm sure you can pull Salesforce into it. Um, but one of the age-old problems with marketing and advertising is basically like say you're running Google ads and say you have 10 different campaigns. Oftentimes the campaign with the lowest cost per lead is not actually your most valuable campaign, especially in B2B, right? Because
Yep.
sometimes, you have campaign A, $20 a lead, campaign B, $50 a lead. So with the absence of any other data, you would of course want to focus on campaign A. Um, but most times if you go through that process of marrying the data, like the actual lead records, the $50 one will oftentimes be much, more profitable.
Bingo. And that's a great point you bring up, right? Because one of the things that when I came in, the first data point I was looking at from, let's say, PPC, and LinkedIn, like digital advertising, right? Different channels was what's our success? And I actually did get a average CPL, an average lead volume report. And I said, no, I would love to parse that into different campaigns. And then I want to break that up, but I also want to see downstream because oftentimes I think what happens is marketers also get caught in this. And I think this is another stat that I read recently. Um, Leads. Most companies still are in the leads world, right? And it's
Yeah.
not just leads. If that lead doesn't become a qualified enough conversation if it's not an NQL, but that NQL doesn't pan out and turns into your pipeline that sales can actually work and take to the final stage, it doesn't matter, right? So that's why for me, I just didn't want to lean in on just CPM, just the volume or average CPL and average. I wanted to see which of those campaigns I'm actually seeing pipeline. That was the other way to whittle down. And in that first quarter, I also got to compress because again, it's peanut butter. Otherwise, you're like, hey, you know, you're getting $15 per CPL, right? That's your CPL. Let's go do more. No, if you parse it, you will find that certain tactics never got results and they were just your $15 CPLs.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm going to tell you about a concept that we use called revenue driven optimization. This is for paid media mostly. But the idea is exactly that. So you've got your lead event firing, but then you also create events for down funnel. So you're linking, say, your Google ads with your Salesforce. So when an opportunity is created or when a contact is created, you can create these different steps in the funnel.
Right.
That in and of itself is incredibly valuable. Like for any media buyer who all they can see in platform is leads, or they have to go and manually parse the data, like that is very time consuming. So just simply being able to see the down funnel metrics in platform is very, very powerful. But there's also, once there are events in platform, you can change the optimization target. So once you are getting enough volume, like instead of optimizing for that lead event, you can begin optimizing for the opportunity created or even the opportunity won if you have a lot of volume. And in that way, you're leveraging the vast data pools that Google has on people. So it can see, a lot of similarities between individuals at different stages that we wouldn't see.
Nice.
So that's the core. Like that's really the core of what we call revenue driven optimization, where you're optimizing for these down funnel events. Um, and then there's a whole bunch of other things that go into it too. Like we also want to have events set up for pre-conversion, like earlier than lead, right? Because especially in an enterprise B2B world where like you might not be getting 100 leads a day or, something that's significant. So we want to have at least one or two signals set up prior to the lead. And so usually our landing pages that we're creating take some sort of an interactive form. So like we're almost never gonna like include the 4 or 5 field form on that first screen, but
Mhm.
instead it'll be sort of like land on it and it'll probably ask you a binary question. Like, are you this or are you that? Kind of a thing.
Got
So
it.
in doing that, we're getting a signal on that click, but then we're also filing that person away as, either a good prospect or a not so good prospect.
You're sort of doing progressive disclosures or profile building, but you're collecting just a little bit without overwhelming them with that
Yeah.
form.
And we're doing it anonymously, which is the key. Like if you try to first like get all their information and ask them a couple questions, you'll get some, but you'll get way more if there's no PII, like no email, no phone. We're going to get that later. Um, but it's also really useful. Like say that you sell to dog owners, but not cat owners. So that landing page would be like, hey, which kind of pet do you have? Dog or cat or both? So instead of just retargeting to everybody, we're going to retarget only to the ones that make the right selections.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean?
That's, yeah, no, that's a good thought. Something that I think might be worth for, I mean, this is me thinking aloud, an A/B test in terms of maybe one of our next campaigns.
Totally. Totally. Sorry for nerding out on that a little bit.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Was it's always learning, right? You keep learning, and that's really what I am excited about marketing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, there's so much stuff happening so quickly. I want to nerd out with you some more. I've lost track of time a little bit and the time's getting away. That means we're having fun, I think. But tell us about Jitterbit because like it's a I mean, it seems like a really awesome company. I think I don't fully get it, but like it seems like there's so many potential applications even for like a marketing org.
Yep.
Um so like tell us a little bit about it and just like describe some of the use cases like how it might actually work out.
Yeah, and you were right, right? The use cases for every persona, and we call them line of business persona. So there are lots of things you can do. So high level, and this is where I'm going to do a little bit marketing pitch, but I'll give you a little bit lay person explanation. So we say Jitterbit, we help companies accelerate their business transformation, and we put them on a hyper automation path. And for that, we provide automation solutions, we provide application development solutions. And really, at the core of it, we help people automate by connecting their applications, processes, workflows. And now, when I mention a lot of connection, you think about an organization, right? Behind the scenes, and we talked about one stand, right? Hey, a marketer deals with 10, 15 systems as an example. But
Yeah.
think about new employee onboarding. So you're onboarding a new person and you want to make sure that they get their day one email set up. You want to make sure that their payroll information, the bank information and stuff they need to fill out is set up. You want to make sure that they have a laptop and that's shipped. You want to make sure they get the benefits information.
Yeah.
So maybe there is training, right? Week one training, month one training.
Yeah, you have to
For
create a Slack for them and a Asana for them, a Harvest, like all these, like for us, there's 25 different things to do.
exactly. But now think about the 25 different things I talked about. And someone has to, let's assume now in this case, IT has to make sure they have to go and set them up. HR has to keep following up and saying, hey, set them up here, set them up here, set them up here. So what we do is actually make that seamless, right? So you can connect systems, enter, once you connect the systems, enter the data, and it flows all the way to the relevant systems. And the person is set up, they get their onboarding package. Same thing. Customer is placing an order, right? The e-commerce vendor, they're placing an order. That order needs to get through all the way to your ERP system. You need to now be able to ship that order. Maybe there's a third party vendor. You need to pull them in and make sure they're including whatever services with that order. An invoice is being sent for that customer. All these different things that need to happen, they're all in different systems. So again, we help that use case from an end-to-end perspective. You just need to think, hey, I need to do order to, fulfillment, or I need to do employee onboarding. So those are some of the use cases. And if you think about this now, every company has these kind of issues they grapple with. And that's where no manual workflows, right? You don't have to rely on manual automations or manual setups. You don't have to worry about your data being missed in one system or not. Um, so we help with actually streamlining all of that. So you get it done once and, it's pretty quick. Now, there is another aspect to what we do, and I talked about application development. So, say you don't want to actually just connect data in different systems, right? You want to also be able to extract data. And, the third party e commerce case that I talked about, you want to now send it off to your third party, you know, fulfillment partner. You can also use our solutions, application development solutions, to pull data out of your system, build an app, and expose that to third parties so they don't have to have access to all their internal systems. They just get the relevant data and they can visualize and work through that. So
Wow.
really critical uh, aspect. I would say this is a backbone for most companies, but it's not that, hey, it's in your face kind of a product, right? That people see, but this is something that you need. Every company, every organization, every group, needs this at some level or the other.
Well, the vast majority of businesses are small. I think for small businesses, they kind of don't get it. Um, or if they do get it, they think that it's out of reach, like difficult or expensive. Is this just for like bigger companies mostly, or like could a 100 person, 200 person company do this, or is this just for like 10,000, 5,000, like upper?
Yeah, no, we actually have customers, we do have smaller customers, commercial accounts. We also have mid market. We do have enterprise customers. So we span the gamut, right? Because, hey, if you're a small company, maybe you have two systems that you're grappling with. So the scale might increase, the complexity might increase, the use cases might become more complex. But, hey, if you're a one person company, then maybe you don't, you might rely on cutting and pasting stuff and, trying to figure that out. But if you're a smaller company and you do have some systems and you do have this can help streamline, right? It can help you become faster, can help your employees become faster, less burnout. So you can think about all those benefits, right? So there is a use case. There is something that we can do for everybody.
Wow. I mean, I'm selfishly just thinking about web mechanics because as an agency, like when we onboard a new client, there's 25 things to do, probably even more. It's things like we need to create projects for them in Asana, right? In a certain way. We need to create Harvest. That's our time logging. We need to go in Google Drive and there's a folder structure, right? Like all clients need to have certain documents and we need to send the client intake questionnaire, all these different things. And it's right now more or less manual. I mean, some parts of it are automated. Uh, those seem like they could be automated. Does that sound like it? Like that whole
Yeah.
process could be
No, we should
automated?
definitely set up time and talk through all your internal systems, processes. onboarding a client, onboarding, a new employee, making sure they have everything, right, they need. Can talk through use cases, more in depth and see how this might help you.
That's brilliant. All right. You might have just gotten yourself a new customer.
It's always about, like I said, it's learning, right? And that's the one thing I love about these conversations. You learn something new, that you can use. Like I jotted down a couple of things that we were talking about earlier. There's always, best practices that we learn or new solutions that we find out about.
Yep. Yep. So, Jitterbit sounds amazing. You are amazing. They're very fortunate to have you. I'm excited to see what you can do there. It seems like you guys are already doing great. I'm on the homepage right now. The site looks great. I love your sort of like your live chat, build your own adventure interface there.
Well,
Um, so you guys are doing a lot of awesome stuff. Good. Well done.
yeah, thank you. And we have more to do. And, it's a constant journey, right? Lots more improvements, constant testing, conversion tools testing and all of that good stuff.
Yeah. No, and I really am interested actually in Jitterbit because I'm on the site under use cases. You've got like employee management, da 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 da, lead to order, but lead generation is listed as one of the use
It is.
cases.
Yep.
So that's really interesting. Um, so let's seg and just for like a couple minutes, let's uh geek out and just like nerd out on some stuff. But let's start with Jitterbit for lead gen. Like how would Jitterbit work for lead gen?
So again, same thing, right? You're working with, media agencies. You're working with different tools. You're working with, how do I bid? How much do I bid? And in all, fairness, that's not something that we have a lot of customers, but we do have all these use cases that have been tested that we do work with. But it's really about, you know, think about the use case, like even your use case that you talked about, right? Hey, you have to onboard a new customer, or you have to get them the best practices, whether it's SEO or SEM, you know, think about the use case. So it's literally the use case and how can we connect and make that data flow and make it seamless. So internally, we use our own solutions also all the way from, data to getting it into Salesforce and being able to build those dashboards, being able to invoice. So we do use a lot of our solutions
Hmm.
as well internally.
Nice. Yeah. So you're eating your own dog food, as they say.
Yeah. And we haven't done the lead generation part yet. That is a conversation that we are having. There is another third party that, I'm trying to schedule a meeting that we can talk to, where they have lead generation, connectors, and we want to kind of work through and see if there's any synergies as well in terms
Hmm.
of the connectors and leveraging the Jitterbit platform.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Cool. What are some other tools or tech that you guys are looking at?
As a marketer, again, this I think a marketer is generic when I say this, but content, right? There is a lot of content needs that we have. We have to focus on different persona. We have to message different pain points, make that connection between their pain points and our benefits. And, how do we convince them that this is the right solution? So I think for me, a couple things that I'm exploring, one of it is how do we take the content we have and how do we make sure we make it bite size, but we can use that in different, channels, right? People don't Not everybody can consume a 20-page data sheet. Not everybody can, binge read like 20 assets that you throw their way. Just like a progressive disclosure, profile building that you talked about, we want to make sure that we take the content, but we make it small enough that it catches their attention. Maybe it's a key benefit, maybe it's key stats. So I am exploring a solution there with an AI vendor that I just recently found. I've been testing it, and so far, I like what I've been able to do with it and what I've seen.
Oh,
Uh,
cool. So it's sort of like content repurposing.
Content repurposing. So it's not rebuilding your content. It is taking the content you have, but breaking it into logical pieces. that you can then use on different platform. Then you can, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it
Right.
is Twitter, right? You're getting that attention from your audience. So
Brilliant.
that is one. There is another one that, again, we talked about conversion, and I have explored this. I've been, at least I've researched. I haven't tried this out yet, but there is this vendor, this tool where they talk about sort of like what you were saying. Hey, if someone is in the awareness state, but I want to give them awareness content. So you come to our homepage, you don't have to grapple with all that content on the homepage. You can just see a video that gives you a high level. What is Jitterbit? What can it do for you? And then maybe you come to the website 3, 4 times, you've done more. Then we know, hey, you're serious. Then we show something else, right? But it's again matching the activities and the persona to what? But it's all anonymous at this point, right? We just know, hey, you'll come there once, you'll come there twice, you'll consume A, B, and C, but match the stuff that they resonate with them rather than them searching through. So that is another vendor I'm evaluating still, but it sounds interesting because it's at the end of the day, it's about connecting that user with what you do and getting that, you know, the match, right? I think that's why this was interesting for me. It reduces friction. They don't have to search. And I'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah. No, I'd be interested. There's a tool that we've been using for a while. We're actually partners with them. It's not in the personalization realm, but it's more so in the predictive lead scoring realm. So it will basically, like, you install the pixel on your site, you tell it essentially like what the best customer, like who the best customers are as those customers come through. And think of it almost like Google Analytics on steroids, but like that pixel, they showed it to me. It tracks like literally every single move, all anonymously.
Hmm.
But like even in a simple web journey, there's going to be hundreds or if not thousands or tens of thousands of data points. It even will track like how hard they're pushing the mouse down or like how hard they're tapping on the screen kind of thing. So it builds really detailed profiles of what good customers look like for you. And then uh, you can take that data, use it as a seed audience, and then activate those seed audiences on LinkedIn or on Facebook or Google, wherever you're advertising. And like so for instance, let's say you get 100 visitors, and typically from 100 visitors, you would get like 2 or 3 or 5 conversions.
Uh-huh.
This will sort of synthetically deliver conversions in platform based on what it believe, like based on like propensity to convert. So in platform, you end up seeing a lot more conversions, and so the AI basically learns that much faster.
Nice.
Um, but it's long story short, it's a way to get better leads, better opportunities for cheaper.
So it's sort of like determining their sentiment, but more not just the sentiment, their propensity to buy based on, I mean, what you said, the keyboard strikes and, even patterns like that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. But the cool thing is it's called Tomi, Tomi.ai. The cool thing is it's designed for long cycle B2Bs, like B2Bs with long selling cycles and not huge amounts of data.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because there's a lot of tools like that for, B2Cs or e-coms that are getting large conversion volumes.
Yeah.
Um, and then the last one I'll tell you about briefly, because I've just been obsessed with it because it's so powerful, is Rask.ai.
Uh-huh.
So Rask.ai is it's an AI video tool, and it has a few different use cases. One is amazing translations with lip sync. So like you could
Right.
make me fluent French, and like my lip, the movement of my lips would match up almost exactly. Um, but you can then like with a certain, I think you have to have maybe 5 minutes or so of video. You can create your own avatar really easily, or you could create an avatar for your CEO or whatever it is. And then you can create really realistic looking videos. Like you could type it and basically your CEO would be delivering it like with their mannerisms and with their tone of
Oh,
voice and everything. So like every marketer would love for their CEO to be like a thought leader on LinkedIn, right? But no CEOs have the time, or many of them just don't want to do that. But this basically is, text to video sort of avatar for
no, I
that
mean,
CEO.
I'm thinking of the use case automatically, right? We have a huge customer base in LATAM. They, you know, like everything to be in Brazilian Portuguese, right? So we have to literally, any webinar we do, any, keynote or any video, let's say even our CEO bill, right? We have to make sure that it's translated, but the translation is just you know, a subscript or what do you call it, closed caption in
Yeah.
their language, but it'll still be in English. It'll just be closed caption, right? Which now when you mention this, the power of, hey, our webinars now suddenly starts to make more sense because, hey, who wants to just look at closed caption, right? You want to hear it in your language. So,
Yeah.
and then EMEA, we have customers in dark, Nordics. So I think this is a great tool that I will go and research.
Yeah. And the translations were surprisingly good too, like much better than Google Translate.
Yeah,
Cause
I
like
have
we
heard
have,
that about Google Translate. I mean, every time.
yeah. But hey, look, I know we're about time here. I wish we had more time. Um, we do you want to do the lightning round or you want to skip it? We
We can
we could
skip it.
skip if you want.
Yep.
All right, let's skip it. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Jayashree. This has been an amazing conversation. I am leaving inspired, and I've really enjoyed every minute of it. Um, so thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. I think, you were a great host. I learned a lot of things as well, some new tools. I think we should exchange notes on how our A/B tests and, any pilots go. But thank you for having me. This was a pleasure and, blast.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And for everybody listening, if you enjoyed this, if you learned anything, or if you're leaving with even a touch of inspiration, drop us a like or a comment or a 5-star review wherever you get your pod. We always appreciate that. Um, Jai Shri, for folks that would like to learn more about you or Jitterbit, where would you direct them?
Go to jitterbit.com, see if there's a use case that works for you. Reach out to our awesome SDR team. We'll be in touch. We'll explain what, right, and how you can leverage our solutions. Follow me on LinkedIn. You have any ideas or you want to learn more context switching data? Happy to have a virtual coffee or chat with you.
Love it. Cool. Stay on the line just one more minute, Jai Shri. We'll wrap up. But for everybody else, that was another awesome episode of Revenue Driven CMO, and we'll see you next time. And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us here today. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at revenuedrivencmo.com. That's revenuedrivencmo.com. And hey, exclusive for listeners of this podcast, Web Mechanics will do 10 to 20 hours of work for you for free. Literally no sales calls, no BS. Just give them a problem and they will put a team to work for you for free for 10 to 20 hours. Even if you're already a client, if you're struggling with demand gen, lead gen, SEO, SEM, Google ads, LinkedIn ads, conversion optimization, if you can't get Facebook or Meta ads to work for the life of you, or you can't figure out attribution, Web Mechanics will take a good hard look at whatever problem you give them, whatever programs you put in front of them, and they will give you an objective, informed opinion, plus some advice from 10 to 20 hours of senior level attention. And that's just because you're a listener of this podcast. So I would suggest take them up on this offer. It's ridiculous. Go to revenuedrivencmo.com/free, fill out the 2-minute form, and you will not regret it. Literally zero downside, unlimited potential for growth. So do yourself a favor, revenuedrivencmo.com/free, no hyphens, no punctuations. You will be happy about that decision.